Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner, and today's podcast is why nourishing the mother matters more than ever. So today what we're going to be talking about and around and into is the concept of your own nervous system regulation having an influence beyond just your body and nervous system, what that means and looks like for our children, and how we can take our parenting to an even deeper level than perhaps where we even perceive we're at right now. So it could be deep, it could be juicy, but before we do that, we would love to invite you to this week's podcast sponsor.
Yes, so this week our podcast is sponsored by Happy Flame Handcrafted Beeswax. So the beautiful Anka and Peter operate their business, their really gorgeous heart-centered business from the Northern Rivers in New South Wales, and they use only 100% Australian certified organic beeswax, which is free from synthetic pesticides, herbicides, hormones and antibiotics. And what I love is that they work in partnership with 12 beekeepers, and they have their bees spread across the rainforest, cattle country, farms and coastline of the Northern Rivers, creating the best honey and the cleanest beeswax available in Australia. They move their bees around to match the seasons of the trees, ensuring that the bees are not affected by any spraying on the farms. And Julie and I are just delighted that we have a couple of their gorgeous Christmas candles to take pride of place on our table as we light them every evening for our Advent with our children coming up. So we really invite you to check out Happy Flame. Their candles are also candles that I have used at the births of my two daughters as well, and at my blessing ways, and they are just divine. I just like grab the beeswax every now and again and just kind of sniff it. Like the smell is so like just like intoxicating. I love it.
You can't beat it. It's super luscious, isn't it? There's something extraordinary about it.
It's so good. So yes, if you're interested in getting some beautiful candles for your home or to celebrate the festive season, check out happyflame.com.au.
So let's talk about today. Oh no, before we do that, I'm going to ask you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down to the red banner. And if you would love to just be part of our community where we just let you know what's going on, drop in your email and we will keep you in the loop. So nourishingthemother.com.au. So today I think let's just start with some basic theory before we dive into application. Yes. And I'm going to kick it over to you first, Bridget, because I think that you have a fantastic knowledge on how this works and functions. So can you explain a little bit deeper what it means? Okay, first off, I think we need a bit of a glossary around what does regulation and dysregulation mean?
Great.
Let's start there.
we'll start there. So we all have a nervous system, right? If you're breathing and you're alive, you have a nervous system. And our nervous system and our brain are always seeking homeostasis or some kind of level of balance or centeredness. But that means that we're going to go through periods where we're feeling really centered and balanced or regulated. And we're going to have periods where we're off center or off balance and we are dysregulated. Dysregulated means that there is a lot of activation in our system. So maybe we're in fight or flight mode, maybe we're in freeze mode. Sometimes it can be as a result of a trauma response or simply overstimulation. And it's part of being human. And our resilience is built from our capacity to go into dysregulation and back into regulation, and go into dysregulation and back into regulation. And resilience looks like a well cultivated capacity to move in and out of those states. And our children, young children or babies, they don't have that capacity yet to regulate themselves. They rely on somebody with a more mature nervous system to help them regulate. So that is what the glossary term for that is that very often parents play the role of being the external regulator, because if you consider the developing brain, when we're born, infants really only have the lower centers of the brain that are developed. So they're the more reptilian, earlier parts of the brain, which don't have the capacity for reason, logic, and, prefrontal cortex kind of thinking. None of that is online yet. And so we as the adult or parent take on that role of soothing, helping them kind of get their needs met and helping them come back into a regulated state, because the crying baby is actually the dysregulation seeking somebody outside of them to help them regulate. And they regulate by us rocking them, for example, when they're born. But even when our children are 5 and 7 and 15, they're, from a brain development point of view, they still don't have the full wiring of the prefrontal cortex. So they still need us to rock them in some way. And our capacity to rock them is influenced by how well we can rock ourselves and meet our own need for regulation. So that's what we want to explore in this podcast, because this is why nourishing the mother matters more than ever, particularly in a time in history where the sensory stimulation, particularly for children, is unprecedented. And so the mental processing that's required of children today is significantly greater than it has been in previous generations, resulting in more children having difficulty regulating and difficulty processing the sensory input that's coming at them. And so more than ever, recognizing our role as patterners, or as recognizing our role as helping our children pattern their own nervous system in a healthy way, means that we need to know what we need to maintain and manage our own regulation.
How does someone start that process of trying to work out what they need? Well, yeah, first off, does it become you need to recognize or bring awareness to your own states of regulation and dysregulation, and then work out what happens in the space in between to consciously move yourself from a state of feeling out of balance to a state of feeling in balance?
I think for all of us, it puts front and center that principle that gets bandied around all the time, which is essentially, putting on your oxygen mask before you put somebody else's on, which means, what things do I need to manage my own tendency to move into fight or flight or freeze or any kind of collapse state, and what primes my nervous system to function at its best. And so very often it is prioritizing our own nourishment. It is considering what kinds of stimulation we seek or we consume, what kind of things activate us, and recognizing when we're getting in a space of feeling over-activated. So maybe there's things that we could be doing to reduce that. So monitoring our screen use, monitoring sometimes even just the way that we engage in media, the kinds of energy that we also seek to be around as well, because sometimes we can almost get in our own cycles of burnout due to being hooked on particular states of being, right? Like we can get hooked on late night watching of TV because it kind of gives us some kind of outlet, but ultimately we know it's burning us out, for example. It's prioritizing where we can sleep. And again, for the new mother, this is more than ever recognizing the deep contribution and value and role that you have to play, not only in your own family, but in this world and the service that you're providing, so that you can value everything that you need to value in order to recognize how important it is that you are fill up, and that you are as nourished as you can be. I just think it's again, like, how do I most effectively resource myself to provide in the way that I'm providing for my family, and us not, and us really change the paradigm in a way to not simply accept the scraps, right, or simply accept that we're expected to do it all on our own or exist within this really narrow bandwidth of feeling good,
What influence then do we have on our child's developing nervous system? Like, is that a long-term imprint, or is that something that can be?
It is. I mean, it's a long-term imprint, but I also don't want this to come with a sense of heaviness or overwhelm, though I recognize that it can. It's long-term imprint essentially because by nature of brain wiring, 90% of our brain's wiring is done by the age of 3. And then everything else just gets kind of plugged into that program or plugged into that template. And so we are operating off the, first 3 years of the template that we got from our parents, which will be why you might, the new mother or the mother of young children often hits levels of rage you didn't know were there, which will be harking back to those earlier programs, potentially from her own mother. So it does really matter. But we also know, of course, with neuroplasticity, that there's enormous amounts of change that happens in the brain, as we
grow. On the environment.
Depending on the environment. But that this is why parenting is not simply just parents raising children. It's children raising parents, because our kids are raising us to be who they need us to be in order for them to be parented. So it's this crazy kind of plug-in of early templates that we've got, and then what we're providing to our child, and both people in that relationship are being asked to grow. So when we think about where we get taken to with our own child's dysregulation and what that means in our body and how we might deal with that, seeing that as an invitation to move to a higher order and to repattern our system to a higher order beyond where it is now, then means that we're changing our wiring. So we're actually healing in the moment that we're bringing regulation to our system and giving our child an opportunity to pattern their system, which I think is beautiful, because every moment then that we find our own regulation again when we're dysregulated, we're creating a new template, or we're rewriting our templates, and we're giving our child a more elevated kind of baseline of regulation in their own system, which they can come back to, and which is where they kind of operate from as they grow and as their brain develops, which I think is like super cool.
It is super cool. Can you find regulation in an environment that's dysregulated?
It's harder, because we're always, in every kind of relationship, we're always seeking somebody to help us regulate. So even in an adult, like, you'll know what it's like when you say you, for example, you're catching up with a friend, and you notice that with that particular friend, as soon as you're with them, you kind of begin to feel a bit lethargic, you're feeling a heaviness in your system, you're feeling kind of tired, you're feeling like you almost want to check out. And that friend is actually going through some periods of intense dysregulation as a result of perhaps anxiety or depression, for example. And you're feeling all of their states, like all of their nervous system state within you. And so you're actually being brought into their own dysregulation by being in an energetic kind of soup with that person. And so if you are regulated, you have the capacity to help them regulate and notice what it feels like and be a regulator for them, knowing that you have that capacity within your system. But if you're also highly dysregulated and you're with somebody else who's highly dysregulated, unless somebody is there willing to externally regulate the other person, you can both end up in this place of overwhelm and not unable to move out of it. And that's why any sense that any human is an island is illusory, because we're all co-regulators for each other. And that's why our environment matters, because the question really needs to be, how can I create an environment that is supportive for me to, be regulated here, or find somebody within that system to help me come to a level of regulation. And of course, the nature of being human means that through tragedy and trauma, we're going to experience periods of dysregulation. But hopefully, even during those times, there's going to be some carer or somebody who is able to come into that relationship and offer an opportunity to find some regulation and to find a level of healing in that nervous system that means that there's more resilience built to then be a regulator for a child, for example. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I mean, I hope it makes sense to our listeners, because if it doesn't, dear beautiful listener, please contact us on socials or email and let us know your questions so that we can answer it more thoroughly in a future podcast. We would really love that opportunity. So please make sure that if it does fly over your head or you think, oh gosh, it brings up this question for me, please don't hesitate to email it or, whichever way, social it to us so that we can have the opportunity to help you take your practice a little bit further. So please do that.
Taking a quick break in today's podcast to tell you about Flow Mind Body Mothering. It's a new offering from me at Suburban Sandcastles to really package up and create a beautiful space for you to tap into what I see are the three key areas that we can build our toolkit in order to create more flow and more ease in our mothering and understand at a deeper level that the neurobiology of motherhood and also how much our spaciousness matters and how to create that for ourselves. So it's going to be a package of 3 short trainings and worksheets for you to really explore and expand yourself in your world. And you'll be able to purchase those individually or all together, get all 3 for $88. So head over to suburbansandcastles.com to check it out.
What does that look like for you to create an environment that is supportive to your regulation?
I think this is about knowing we're such feeling sensing beings, right? And so our environment shapes us and we shape our environment. And so intuitively, I think a lot of us know what feels good for us in our homes, for example. So I know that my nervous system is better able to come to a regulated place when there's not stuff everywhere and there's not this sense that my house is screaming at me, and that I have a level of order in my external environment. That I have a sense of being able to, affect my environment in some way. And so I think that this is why, those suggestions that say, to mothers, don't worry about the dishes and doesn't matter if your house is messy because, it's just you've got to be with your kids when they're little. I don't think that actually takes into account what can happen to some people's nervous systems when they're in a chaotic environment. It can be very, very difficult to find a level of regulation in that. And then it's even more difficult when you add dysregulated children on top of that, because children live in dysregulation, because they haven't developed yet to be more regulated, they're living in a world of dysregulation, which is also why parenting can be exceptionally challenging sometimes, because we're constantly being pulled into that dysregulation with them. And it's our capacity to, have one foot in their dysregulation and feeling them, but also having a foot in our own sense of regulation and capacity to be an anchor for ourselves and for them. as well, and not lose ourselves in them. So I think that, prioritizing what you need to feel good in your environment and feel nourished by your environment is powerful. And that can mean that maybe you do need to set some boundaries in relationships with people in your home, maybe with your partner, around how you each contribute to an environment that helps everybody thrive and that is nourishing everybody's nervous systems. And that really means tuning into each person's values. So my husband has a really high value on a clean kitchen. I don't as much as him, for example. But I recognize that for his nervous system to feel able to be regulated and then able to help co-regulate our kids more effectively, then doing things around the home that is supportive of his nervous system is actually supportive of my own and everyone's. And so considering each person's needs in that respect is powerful, because ultimately we all want to be able to feel connected to each other and ideally remove the obstacles in a felt sense way that interrupt that.
I love that. It's pretty radical in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, I know it is, isn't it? Because it then kind of goes, well, he should just be able to deal with it, or whatever kind of judgment.
Yeah. I do enough. I shouldn't have to. So, I love it, because as you and I both talk about often is, what does it look like to be loved better by becoming a better lover?
Yeah.
And becoming a better lover means meeting your partner in their values, wanting them to meet you in yours. It doesn't work if you're not willing to give. You don't just keep getting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the definition of the entitled child, isn't it? I don't have to do anything and I just get.
Well, that's exactly right. But I think a lot of our culture is set up like that,
Yeah, it is.
I've had a hard day, he just should, or they just.
Well, it would be easy for you to say, look, the kitchen's the house is not a priority for me. So I don't really, I don't need to look after the kitchen or whatever, make it clean, because that's not helping me with the kids during the day.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know how you would phrase that.
And I have to remind myself, often that, his value is this. So how can I consider his values in how I, run myself in the day? Just like I would hope that he'd consider what my values are, which he does, in how he runs his day, for example. And it's not, and it's how can we each serve each other?
Yeah, how can we serve each other? Exactly. Yeah, I love it. It's just pretty radical in our culture.
Yeah, it's true. You're reminding me that, yes, it's true. That is kind of radical in our culture. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But ultimately, I think if we're wanting to help raise children deeply connected to themselves, and we also need to help ask ourselves, well, whoever else we're sharing our home with, how do I help them stay deeply connected to themselves? And that is, how do I honour who they really are, even when what they value is different to what I value?
Yeah, totally. Teaching our children to love in other people's values, I think, is a life skill. Yeah, while still staying true to yours. What does it mean to you then, the title of our podcast, which is Why Nourishing the Mother Matters More Now Than Ever?
I think it matters more now than ever because we're at this juncture, as I said, where the sensory input in children is unprecedented, and therefore sensory processing issues are increased. At the same time as women and mothers are expecting themselves to be all of the things all of the time, which is also more taxing on their nervous systems. So, mothers and children, and ultimately families, really are asking so much more of themselves and their nervous systems and their brains than perhaps we've asked of ourselves in prior generations. And so knowing what we need to feel able to meet that and continually coming back to ourselves as much as possible in that question is deeply important, I think, because otherwise we will lose our shit, and we will be more often more dysregulated. more often slipping into depression, more often in cycles of blame and shame and relationship disintegration because we're unable to get our needs met in a conscious way. And so everything deteriorates, I think. That's why I think it's really important.
It's powerful.
Do you have anything that, what's your lens on it? What would you say?
Look, I don't know that I've got anything to add because I just think your articulation of anything that has to do with neurobiology is just like next level. And I get so consumed in just absorbing your wisdom that I almost kind of blank on anything that happens in my own head, which is so lovely. I actually really enjoy that experience. It feels for me like sitting in a lecture hall back at uni listening to a lecture that I love, and I love that experience. I love being a learner. Like,
yeah, me too. I love it too.
For life, you know. So I love the experience of blanking my own mind and perceptions and just absorbing someone else's for a period of time. I really enjoy that. So I'm kind of feeling blank because I'm just coming the absorption phase.
Yeah.
What does it mean? Look, I do think that your own nervous system regulation is paramount. So, you know, I mean, you and I've certainly learnt the words regulation and co-regulation. For you, I think normally it would have just been energy. For me, to know how to have energy in your own body, to be able to influence your own physiology and physiological responses by virtue of having a toolkit that you employ that means you're not beholden to someone outside of you for your own sovereignty has always been, I mean, that's been my whole life, right?
Yeah.
How do I find my own sovereignty when in a world of chaos? And that's still something that I'm actually really grateful for. Sometimes it's a really hard lesson, like, and it's a life lesson. I don't know that you ever just get to a point where you're just like, got regulation nailed. Because
no, and I want to emphasize that too, that ultimately, because we're all on a path of growth here, that just like when we hit, like, you know, this plateau, you know, in our spheres of growth, we'll also immediately initiate another challenge to overcome. Just like when we hit a new baseline of regulation in the nervous system, we'll hit a new edge of being taken to greater challenge in order to build more capacity. So it's not like, woohoo, I've learned regulation, I'm sorted. It's I've built this capacity here. Okay, great. Integrate, and then I'll be offered another opportunity to challenge that and stretch and go into a period of dysregulation and learn how to build more capacity. And sometimes you'll also have periods where maybe you are burnt out, or maybe you need to, much like the feminine, right, where you need to actually cocoon and rebuild and nourish. And that will look like, you know, a period of not a lot happening perhaps externally, but that being a really big internal process of building capacity and you know, rebirthing in order to expand. So it's not like it's this, you know, always on thing, or this, you know, like really methodical expansion. It can be really a real flow to it as well, or a real you know, there'll be periods of descent in your ability to integrate and then build capacity.
And each child, right?
Yeah.
New age, new stage. What did we say the other day? New level, new devil?
New level, new devil. Yeah. And each child pushes you at, you know, like I certainly.
In different ways.
Yeah. And different children. I think I've listened to podcasts before. I'm meeting far more edges with my daughter as a 4-year-old than I met as my son as a 4-year-old. So, you know, like different children push different edges, and it's a continual invitation to feel and meet that and move with it and develop your tools and expand.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So what I love about that is the freedom to let go of an end goal that says, well, I will have arrived or I've succeeded when I can, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I tend to look at it far less black and white and far more in the moment is, how am I feeling at the moment? How am I going right now? Or that went a little left or that went a little right. Why was that? You know, like, how can we turn that into a curiosity rather than a place to spiral into shame or blame?
Exactly, because as soon as you spiral into shame or blame, you've lost the capacity to integrate that learning, because you will just not want to enter thinking about that because of the feelings of the shame and blame, which are great. Or exactly instead, if you maintain curiosity with, oh, I wonder what just happened there. Like, I just went from like 0 to 100. That's interesting. And stay open to it rather than shame.
Close in on it.
And often it's like shame, like, I better like engineer my whole world so I don't have to meet that again because that feels too uncomfortable. Whereas if you open it and look at it with curiosity, there's a source of power there.
Yeah, there is. And look, I think that's what it is it can feel like responsibility, but really what it is power. And as we say all the time, with great power does come great responsibility, and sometimes that's going to feel like burden. Sometimes you don't want to have to be the most conscious one in the room.
Yeah.
I get it. But that's why you also equally need to create the pockets of time and spaces in which you're not in charge, you're not leading, and you are fully surrendered and fully able to access all of the energy spectrum that exists within your body. You can't just be contained, emptied energy all day.
No. And and that is where mothers become depleted.
Right. So if you know that that's how you wish to be in motherhood, which again, you know, you and I have spoken about before, being very much a masculine art form, that ability to have mastery over the physiology, to be able to empty out and ground down and, you know, hold the space. That's very much a masculine art form, to be able to take chaos and turn it into something that's very controlled and soothed and cooled. And it's a masculine art form. It's a magnificent one. But if you know that you are fully employing that in your motherhood, and that is 12 hours a day, then where are you counterbalancing that with a feminine? Because or else she's going to come out firing and your dysregulation is going to be pretty brutal.
Yeah. I love that you've mapped that, because it's so true.
Yeah, you have to create space for both, because you are both. You're not one or the other. But what we're offering here is a pathway to power that says you're not at the mercy of an environment. Your nervous system isn't. You're not at the mercy of your past experiences or traumas. Your nervous system can be rewired and repatterned at any point in time. And that your children are always learning from you, and who they're bathing in and the soup that they're bathing in does set them up for life. So what are we setting them up for? Because that's relationship. What we build with them is the platform of relationship that is a dynamic they seek out in the world. And I find that immensely powerful, to go, I want my children to have deeply meaningful, loving, respectful relationships. So then that's the foundation of how I expect our home life to be.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So that's what I think about that.
Thank you. I think that beautifully wraps up this conversation.
Yeah. So we'd love to remind you that we do have the Kids Kindness Advent Collective, of which Happy Flame Candles is part of. So if you're really after a community of like-minded women who are just really interested in creating a whole load of random acts of kindness with their kids as an Advent activity every day, and it gets to be easy, we've got a PDF with all the ideas, a group that helps keep you inspired. We're always a week ahead of our kids' Advent, so that there's plenty of time, space and capacity for you to give your kids the type of festive lead-in that teaches them about a humanitarian spirit and the gift of giving, in which, of course, you receive as well. Then that's definitely the place for you. It's $22 for one person for the 4 weeks, or $33, bring a friend, and it's $33 for the 2 of you. So you can find all of that on our website and on our socials, the Kids Kindness Advent.
And it's something else special that you want to tell our listeners about?
Thank you, Bridget. Yes, my book, Flowers and Honey, The Art of Relationship Desire. I said that around, the art of relationship, love and desire. I can't even getting my words twisted now. That's it. It comes out on December the 5th. So you can pre-purchase the ebook for US 99 cents, or you can wait till the 5th of December and you can purchase the book, the printed version. So on any of the normal platforms that you would be able to order a book online, and certainly I'll be able to have them through my website by then too. So please, I would love for you to bring back and reclaim your power, speaking of nervous system regulation, and capacity to initiate polarity and desire in a relationship that's completely irrespective of how many children or how long you've been together, or just Family Inc. and Life Inc. That you get to have that power and capacity by reclaiming your own feminine and deeply understanding the movements of the masculine. And that's what this book is dedicated to.
It's beautiful. Thank you. So to connect with you, Jules,
is julietenner.love, and to connect with you, Bridget,
suburbansandcastles.com. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.